to operate, or are we going to give you some volume that is consistent, that we're going to be able to predict so that you can give us and our customers, our joint customers, the best service possible. So if we give you garbage, obviously you're going to give us garbage back. We have to seek accurate terminal profiles. Sometimes we do get some very nice PowerPoint presentations that say, I have a terminal with 10 acres, one berth, perhaps 2 cranes or no cranes, and 600,000 TEUs of capacity. Well, we know that that's not possible, so we begin to lose confidence there. I wanted to show you what we look, and we ask the terminal operators always to provide us a berth lineup. Okay? Some terminals provide them easily, and those are the terminals that are more progressive, that really want to work with the shipping line. Created this on an Excel spreadsheet, just modeling some other one, and the line 1 and 2 and 3 are just mock lines, but just wanted to illustrate, because I did not want to share a document that had been given to me, but it's the same concept. So if you break down into shifts, which are labor shifts of about 8 hours, starting at 2400 to 0800, let's say 2400 Sunday to 0800 Mondays, first shift, a line may come in at 2 a.m. and end up at 2 a.m. on Tuesday and block that berth for 24 hours, then leaving perhaps 6 or 8 hours empty before the next line comes up. So when you look at this lineup like this, and the terminals share it with the shipping line, we can work better. We can ask the terminal to renegotiate, because we are all open and we understand. We don't want to block the next guy coming in. We understand that there is a need for consistency in the berth windows, for berth guarantees. And so we may be able to adjust to come in a little bit earlier, to come in a little bit later, so that we can create the proper window. But that only happens if we truly communicate with each other. We cannot do these things in a vacuum. We cannot do it in secret. So if you look at all of those blank spaces there, when you count the individual segments, there are 70 blank segments in berth 1 out of 84, so the utilization is 83.3%. That's a highly utilized port, highly utilized berth. The second berth, which is important, as Gonzalo also mentioned, that at a minimum all ports must have 2 berths because of the ship-to-ship relays that are extremely important today. That berth shows the number of segments, 62 out of 84, or 73.8% utilization. There's some opportunity there to do something more, but depending on how fluid the terminal is, it may already be considered full. So something to keep in mind for those of you who are operating ports and are port operators, obviously. The line, of course, is not getting out scot-free. The line must publish regularly scheduled calls and must guarantee also the arrival within the window that we have been given. If we don't do that, then we become tramp operators, and as such, we disrupt the operation within the terminal. If a line does miss a window because we're not infallible to either weather or issues at other ports, then we naturally go to the next available window, and we have to adjust the following port arrivals or speed up and burn fuel on our dime as necessary to keep that schedule on a weekly basis. So crane guarantees. Say, why do I have to guarantee a crane? Well, we need to know what the productivity is going to be. We need to know that our network is going to be fluid. The industry is moving more and more to fixed day of the week and arrival, fixed day of the week, departure. So for all of you who are terminal operators and have some windows, for all of us who are shipping lines, those windows, those berth windows are golden. Without that, it's going to be nearly impossible to create a sustainable network of weekly fixed container services. We also seek throughput charges that are clear in nature, that we can predict, that we can understand. We don't want any surprises. We have to be very competitive. Our industry is not the most profitable industry necessarily. It is very capital intensive. We operate in ranges of 3 to 5% in the good years. And so we must have that predictability as our customers ask us to be fair with them and give them a predictability of our rate structure. Terminal security. Unfortunately, in Latin America, our terminals are not always fully compliant with security standards. though some are excellent. Some are Basque, CTP, ISPS, all of them. Most of them are ISPS. However, what we find is that we don't find the security at the gate. We don't find the controls that are adequate enough for us to feel comfortable, and we wind up doing additional surveillance on our own in order to secure the containers, or to assure the United States primarily, who requires that a high level of security, to assure them that our vessels that are touching the foreign ports are safe and are not carrying contraband. Not always avoidable, but we do the best to avoid it. Insurance coverage. The standard is $20 million, and not all terminals in Latin America are able to provide that or are willing to provide that. But just look at a vessel and look at the damage to a vessel plus the cargo that we're carrying. $20 million is really not that much. It's simply the standard. So please think about that when you're putting together your terminal packages, and take that responsibility with you as we extend that responsibility to our customers. It is becoming less of an issue as the ports are now becoming more privatized, and so the private industry understands that a bit better than the para-state companies that have been running the ports, but that insurance coverage is very important. With growth, of course, comes additional infrastructure requirements, and one of those, deep water conditions. The channel, the berth, the turning basin for larger vessels that are being cascaded. So if the 14s are cascading the 8500s into the west coast of the U.S. today, and all the way down to Panama, and MSC is bringing vessels here that are 4500, then the 55 and the 56 and the 65 and the 72, and so on, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 are going to be coming here. We require deep water. We also require ship-to-land conveyance availability and variability. For those ports that are able to have on-dock rail, those ports will be the most benefited because they can operate in the smaller footprint in front of the water as long as the conveyance is fluid going through the terminal. And so if you have truck and rail capabilities, you are 100 times better off than only with truck capabilities. Cooperation amongst port authority, port terminals, and regulatory agencies is key to build confidence. We cannot operate in a port and then deal with each individual agency as if it had nothing to do with the port, and they're only concerned about the particular responsibility that they have. Let's not forget whom we service. Let's not forget that we're trying to make the country and the products that the country exports or imports more competitive. At the end of the day, all of us as consumers wind up paying for all of those inefficiencies in the additional costs that we incur. So I wanted to show you some samples of KPIs that we ought to demand of all of the port operators to provide to us and to make transparent, because this is cost. We look at off-terminal queue. Why should a terminal sometimes bother if the line outside to get into the terminal is 2 kilometers or 5 kilometers long, for that matter? Well, it costs money. It costs money to the consumer of that product, or it costs money to the exporter of the product. So we want to make sure that we stay as slow as possible and no more than 15 or 20 minutes waiting to get into a port. On a wheel turn time, in case you have chassis or platforms that you provide service from in the terminal, we want to make sure we stay below 30 minutes. For a truck to go into a terminal, spend less than 30 minutes inside the terminal and come out. These are weekly measurements from terminals that APL operates through in different parts of the world. Grounded turn time. So if a trucker has to come in to pick up a box that is on the ground, it shouldn't take any more than 45 minutes. It should not take more than 45 minutes to go into a port, get mounted, and get back out. Additionally, we want the ports to provide us with weekly visibility on each vessel operation, how we're doing productivity-wise, gross productivity. Not how much the crane did, which could do 35, 40 moves per hour when it's operating, but what about dead time? What about unutilized gang time? All of that has to be accounted for, and the true measurement is total gross productivity for the vessel per hour. How when we came in and when we left, how many moves we made, and that is the productivity, not necessarily productivity per crane. Average local import dwell time. We must measure how this is behaving, because the tendency of imports just sitting at the port could be a symptom that a particular agency may not be facilitating the cargo flow. And so now the cargo begins to stay longer. In this case, week 52, at the end of the year, obviously we jumped from Christmas to the end of the year. But what we want to measure is the tendency. It must stay reasonable. Average export dwell as well. How early are customers bringing in the cargo, and what type of cargo is coming in with 4 or 5 days of anticipation? If refrigerated cargo came in 5 days ahead, then this is a big problem, because we have to plug it in, we have to consume electricity, we have to charge that customer for it. Generally, though, the customer that's shipping refrigerated commodities wants to come in at the very last minute. So this is all primarily dry cargo that is being accumulated at the port. And we must measure that to understand the fluidity of the terminal. Again, these are just samples of measurements that all terminals ought to be producing, all terminal operators ought to be providing to the customers. Finally, I just want to give you something to ponder on. And I would ask all here to question who is the customer at the end of the day. We were asked to talk about the carriers and the carriers' relationship with the port terminals in the face of economic growth. But I wanted to throw this out because I think it's important that we realize that the shipping line contracting a terminal is not necessarily the shipping line as the customer. We're doing that because we have a mission in life as a shipping company, and that is to provide the very best and very consistent service to the cargo owner. So that cargo inside every one of those containers, those are your customers as terminal operators, not just the shipping line. We are a facilitator in that sense. In the same vein, the lines and the terminals must partner to service the cargo. There are time-sensitive commodities that need to be viewed differently. I just talked about the dwell time in the terminal, but it is different to move a container of dry goods, for example, some raw material that may be going to China for recycling. I don't call them junk anymore. I call them recyclable materials.